This is State of Sports, Utah, with your hosts, Jake Lukler and Jason Stowell.
Hey, welcome everybody back to the State of Sports, Utah podcast. My name is Jake, and of course I am not alone. I am with my co-host, Jason.
It's me. Hey, everyone.
That it is. We've been gone for the last half of the 2021 football season, but since the season's over, we wanted to come back, let you know that next season we will be back, and we will be back a lot more consistently. Unfortunately, the second half of this season, we were just filled with a few different unforeseen issues and personal conflicts, but we're not going anywhere. We are still going to be around. We're going to be doing a couple shows here in the preseason, and of course, we have here our postseason show.
Yep, it's almost like having a baby makes life just way more busy. It's interesting how that happens.
Yeah, that it does. Of course, he's the one with the baby. I have, fur babies, but none other kind. Anyways, Jason, why don't we talk about the 2021 football season, since all college football has unfortunately come to an end, and the long wait has officially begun.
Hey, well, long wait for you. I still have basketball. I have something very exciting. I'm still in the thick of sports. BYU's basketball's doing great and loving every second of it, but I can't say the same for 1-9 in conference Utah.
Yeah, well, and see, there's a great reason why I don't follow college basketball.
Never have.
and never have.
Except for March Madness, which everybody watches even if you don't have a team, right?
No, that's very true. Everyone fills out that bracket.
Well, to recap the 2021 season, I thought we'd talk about our highlights of what we liked about the year. Jake may have broken his down a little differently, but I have kind of three different tiers of sections. So, like, my personal, the most exciting part of the 21 season was the week of the Utah game, or the weekend of the Utah game, because you have the Big 12 announcement, and then, of course, you go and beat the University of Utah on your home floor. I'm already in basketball mode. On your home field, breaking the streak. I mean, that weekend was one of the highest I've ever felt as a BYU fan. Personally, I mean, I wasn't around for 1984, and I was 2 when they were, in the Cotton Bowl in '96, and so. For me, that was one of the most excited I've ever felt as a BYU fan. It was so fun. Great weekend. Great implications for the future of BYU. Moving to my next bullet point, and it's the highlight of the season, play highlight. There were a few that you could kind of look at or pick from, but absolutely to me, it's hands down, no question. The play of the year was Tyler Allgeier's punch fumble thing that he did. Somebody made an edit with him with Mjolnir with Thor's hammer, just coming in and boom, punching the football out after the interception. I mean, completely changed the course of the game. Almost, I mean, it really did seal BYU's win, because after that whole drive, including the plays before the fumble and then kind of the reset after the fumble, it took 10 minutes maybe off of the clock. It really burned a lot of time, and Arizona State just did not have enough time to get anything done, and BYU just kind of controlled the line of scrimmage and won the game. So that individual play was one of the most amazing plays I think personally I've ever seen live. I was at the ASU game, and just the emotion of no, an interception, crap, we're gonna lose, and he's running down the field, and then for him to punch it out and just complete flip, we were all just freaking out, so excited. It was crazy. So that play was awesome. And then kind of a personal highlight for me from the season was uniforms this season. It was so nice as a fan of uniforms to see everything that Billy Nixon and BYU equipment have done. This season, every single game in the regular season, they wore a different uniform combination, which they've never done before in the history of the program. They've never had that. So the Royal and Navy helmets were really big inclusions into the kind of arsenal of uniforms that BYU has. And it just made for a fun season. Every game having something new to look forward to as far as uniform goes was kind of fun. And they did repeat a combination in their bowl game, but every regular season game was a new combo. And they still, I think they have maybe 6 combos that they did not wear in the... It's more than that. It is more than that. I mean, it's 16 actually. Sorry, I'm duplicating face masks. They had 16 combos that they didn't even wear this season that they could still wear in the future. So it's a lot of fun. The uniforms, I'm a big fan, so it was exciting.
Jason's very into fashion.
Yes, I'm very fashionable in my Utah basketball shirt and sweatpants today.
Yeah. Well, my highlights for this season really kind of came more down to the memorable, actual game elements. Maybe not necessarily any particular plays, although there's certainly a few I could list, but really just outcomes and just memorable achievements that occurred. The first of which was what I believe to be the turning point of Utah's entire season, which was the win in the Coliseum against USC. And yes, USC was really a train wreck, but that was really the point that I started to really believe that Utah could still accomplish everything that they wanted to. That winning the Pac-12 South was still very much a possibility. Just not only because Utah came and won for the first time in over 100 years in the Coliseum, but Utah dominated that entire game, and they ended up with a very great leading final score. And then the next one was the following week, which was a huge home game against ASU. And what makes that one so memorable, really, was not necessarily the outcome, but was the comeback. Because Utah was getting absolutely destroyed in the first half of the game, but then pitched in a complete shutout in the second half, which just made it one of the most fun games I think I've actually been present in a very long time. It was so much fun to see them come alive and just really kind of shut down ASU in the entire second half and to come out with a pretty good win. Of course, next one is what I think will go down as most people's favorite home game of all time, which was the win against Oregon, which was ranked number 3 at the time. Huge playoff contender at the time, and we just completely demolish them and dominate them at home, 38-7, which was again probably going to go down as most people's favorite game to watch of all time. It's just fantastic. Cubbies, return for to the house right before halftime is probably the highlighted play of the year, if I had to say something. Then, of course, as my apparel suggests, Utah then went and destroyed them again in the Pac-12 championship, which was probably the most satisfying game, just because I was pretty nervous that Oregon would be back with a vengeance. I don't know where they dropped their vengeance, but it was certainly not in Vegas.
Dude, Mario Cristobal was checked out. I think 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Like by the end of the season, when they lost that game to Utah, I think it was just like he knew, he was out of there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and he had to flee to the ACC in order to not have to face Utah again. And he had to embrace a different you, but then of course, the final highlight was just the Rose Bowl itself. Yeah, we lost, and that was. It was a heartbreaking loss, but frankly, it was a fantastic game. I've actually watched it a couple times since it happened, and honestly, it's just so much fun to watch. I mean, honestly, this season ended up being one of the most satisfying and fun seasons that I can remember in a long time. And it was a blast. It made me just fall in love with football all over again. Not that I was ever out of love with it, but it's one of those seasons where you're reminded why you love football so much. And yeah, so those are definitely what I think the highlights were for Utah.
Well,
this year.
and especially coming off of a pandemic season and shortened year and just all sorts of weirdness. Like I think for both BYU and Utah, because BYU had questions, too, about the legitimacy of their 2020 season. How good was it actually? And then they come and play 7 Power Fives and go undefeated versus the Pac-12 and really proved that they're headed in a great direction. So awesome seasons for both teams, and I think a little bit of positivity, I guess, looking forward for both BYU and Utah. Right, for Utah, you've already kind of established what what the mold is for success, right? You worked through, several seasons of getting in your recruits and struggling to play against Power 5 football. You started to win. You win the South, or you almost win the South, right? You tie for the South technically, but USC gets the nod.
Yeah.
And then you win the South. You win the championship game, and you go to the Rose Bowl and you lose. But the cookie cutter for winning in the Rose Bowl is already there because you've done that with, I think, the Pac-12 South, with the championship of the Pac-12. Like, that mold is already there. So Utah's in a good position to get a win in the Rose Bowl. And I think that success that Utah has had over the past 10 years is a stepping stone similar for BYU, right? You take those same steps as you join the Big 12. You get in your recruits, you build that depth, which is something that I think BYU is really missing this season. Like, we talk about differences of seasons between BYU and Utah. Man, what a difference the front half of BYU season was versus the last half of Utah seasons. They were very different, and I think personally, I know that is due to depth. BYU had lost so many guys on defense, and they finished the bowl game with like 6 walk-ons playing defense and like starting on defense, and didn't have their quarterback. It's all these things that compile that just getting that Power 5 reputation helps build your depth for your program so that you can have long-term sustained success over the course of your season, and you don't drop a bowl game to UAB, which sucked, frankly. It really did, but I think that by that point BYU was pretty checked out from their season because of the number of injuries that they had sustained. So
Just one thing I want to mention is just really there's nothing to hang your head about a 10-2 regular season. There really isn't. In fact, I actually looked the statistics up right before we started, and Utah State is actually included in this. This is the first time that Utah State and BYU have all ended the season with at least 10 wins and have all been ranked in the top 25. It has never happened before. And, I mean, hey, all 3 of our, FBS schools had 10 wins and 2 conference championships and ended in the top 25. That's never happened before. But hey, this was a great year for Utah college football on all aspects. And hey, just a shout out, kudos to Utah State. They did great. And we don't really cover them because neither of us are really interested in Utah State football, because everyone who doesn't live in Logan and its surrounding suburbs really doesn't care about Utah State football. But hey, kudos to them. They looked great on a very national stage in a great bowl game.
Yeah, well, and overcoming the hurdles of Boise State
Yeah.
and San Diego State and the Mountain West is tough.
It was they had a great season too, and just all three teams looked great. It projected a lot of strength, and I think it'll influence the state of Utah and our ability to recruit and bring players all over the country into the state of Utah for years to come. Because
and importantly too, keeping guys from the state of Utah in the
Exactly.
state, because that's been a big problem in recruiting, is guys leaving and going elsewhere.
exactly.
So
I think
lots of good for the state.
exactly.
So moving on to our next section, which is conference news. As far as the Big 12 goes, the main thing that is really the only thing that is newsworthy is the talk in the last couple weeks that they're going to be figuring out divisions for the new Big 12 soon. It's looking like Texas and Oklahoma are not going anywhere early. At least that's kind of the general consensus now, is that they're not going to be able to afford to pay the buyout to get into the SEC early. So you're going to have several seasons with 14 teams. So the conversation is centered around splitting Texas and Oklahoma into one division and the other, so that when they leave, you just take them out of the divisions and you don't have to reshuffle the deck. You're already set up to just move on into the future of the Big 12.
So, Jason, question for you then.
Yes.
Obviously, you
I have
as
a
a
feeling
fan,
I know what you're going to ask.
obviously there are a lot of projections, and a lot of people say it's going to go this way. A lot of people say the alignment's going to go that way. What is you as a fan? What's your preferred outcome? How would you structure the divisions if you were in the room and got to draw the lines?
So it's super simple to me. It's an easy decision, because when I look at it, there's a couple factors that push me into believing that it should go at one direction. The first being, I think you have to split up the Texas schools. Everyone in the conference, Texas is a massive recruiting hotbed, right? Everyone in the conference deserves, when the conference is centered in Texas, everyone in the conference deserves an opportunity to go play in Texas, to bring recruits to the game, to be able to send, to do some recruiting visits, when you're in Texas, things like that. That just, it makes a lot of sense to split them up, so that everyone in the conference has that opportunity to play at least once in Texas. So that one is a big one for me. And then the second one is geography. I've seen a lot of fans kind of brushing over the idea of geography, like, we can just fly wherever. And while I agree to some extent, I do think that you still have to consider your other sports when you're planning for these things, right? With divisions, I think it just makes more sense in my brain that you take the closest schools and you put them in divisions that are next to each other. Like, you do not want BYU trying to go fly to UCF or West Virginia on a yearly basis, or for these other sports. That's just not feasible. So considering those two things, my split is East-West. The North-South division thing sounds legitimately terrible to me. And so when you look at the map, the most sense that it makes for me for divisions are splitting it. So you have in the West division, you have BYU, Texas Tech, TCU, Oklahoma State, Kansas State. And then in the East division, you have Baylor, Houston, Iowa State, Cincinnati, West Virginia, UCF.
And then, of course, Texas and Oklahoma going to one of each, respectively.
Yes,
for the first
and ultimately they don't matter geography-wise. You can do that, but ultimately you're just trying to throw them in one in each division, and then get them out of the conference and not have to restructure. So I don't know. That way, to me, right? You're splitting up the 4 Texas schools, and geography-wise, that the way that I just split it makes the most sense to me anyway. I like that conference for BYU. I think it's reasonably tough because you have,
State.
Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, TCU are tough. Those are tough opponents, But you've got Kansas, which is almost a guaranteed win every season, and Kansas State is not. They're hit or miss. So it's Power 5 football. It's all going to be tough, but I do personally like, for BYU's chances, I like that divisional split up. But that is my opinion on how they should split.
We might very well do a podcast soon after the official reveal of the Big 12 conference structuring. More on that in the future. But next up is obviously the Pac-12 conference news, and really the biggest news is all the coaching carousel and all the new how the Pac-12 will look differently this next year. And I guess the two biggest ones are who's coaching USC and who's coaching Oregon. And as a Utah fan, I'll admit Oregon, I don't know, Dan Lanning, yes, you could say his defense did just win a national championship, but I don't know, I'm a lot less worried about Oregon.
First-time head coach.
Yeah, first-time head coach.
A lot of questions.
Yeah, a lot of questions there. Heck, a lot of
transfers
players are transferring out of Oregon. They're getting out, and that must be for a reason. So what the aspect of it all that really scares me as a member of the South Division is that of Lincoln Riley. Whereas Oregon is losing everyone in the transfer portal, USC is gaining everyone in the transfer portal. Obviously, they didn't have a lot of 2022 recruits, but they have killed it in the transfer portal. I believe they're in the top 5 for gains from the transfer portal this year. And so, obviously, that's pretty concerning. But what's really nice is the mold for Utah has been set. Our offense and a great number of our star players are coming back, as we'll discuss a bit later. And really, the key that I think is the majority of our coaching staff has stayed put. We've had one coach leave for another school, and we've had one retire, all of which were in the assistant coaching staff, but all the head coaches and and offensive coordinators, they're all staying. They're all continuing on, which I think is the key for Utah going forward, and it's great to have that stability. So moving on from conference news, let's go on to what I actually have been looking forward to talking about the most is essentially who's leaving, whether that's from the portal or to the league, who's staying, and who's coming in, whether that be from the transfer portal or just high school recruits. So obviously the biggest players from Utah who are leaving are all actually going to the league, which is obviously our starting linebackers, Nephi Sewell and Devin Lloyd. They were huge weapons this last season and in the previous seasons, and it's just going to be really tough to have going forward without them. But hey, great for them. Next up is one of our starting running backs, TJ Pledger. He's going to the league as well. He will be sorely missed. We only had him 1 year. Next, of course, was the old man himself, Britton Covey. He just chose not to continue on for his last year. What I think is probably would be his 7th year in college sports. So he's leaving for the league, and good for him. He's one of those players where he's just kind of the face of the program, and so you're sad to see him go, even though you know it's time. And honestly, he had an incredible season, so he's probably not going to have a better chance than he will this year.
And I think there's a role for him really in the NFL. I think he has
absolutely
the stuff for mimicking some of these similar style NFL players. Slot receiver, returner. Absolutely think he will
100%
have a shot in the league.
100%.
He's awesome.
Jason, what about who's leaving BYU this season? Not coming back.
So, as far as players leaving, there's not going to be a lot of turnover, and that's what's exciting. I think, like you've mentioned with Utah, both BYU and Utah are pretty young across the board with players, and so the biggest impact right off the bat, of course, is Tyler Algier. That's how do you replace a top 3 running back in college football? I mean, it's really difficult to it's going to be really difficult to do that. So a big loss for Tyler to leave for the team, but super excited for him. He's going to absolutely kill it in the NFL, and what a cool story for him to go from walk-on linebacker to potential NFL running back. Very, very cool story. Wish him nothing but the best in the NFL. And then so I will call it a surprise because the way that he did it was surprising. But I did call this, I think on our podcast, I said that I expected that Baylor was going to transfer after this season. But Baylor Romney is either stepping away from football or transferring, and there's been some discussion on what that's going to be, but I did think that was interesting because I feel like he could start at a Power 5 school. Like, honestly, I really do think that there are a number of schools that this season, like Oregon, for example, right? Oregon had good players and played really well across the board until they got to Utah, but they did not have a quarterback. Their quarterback play was horrible.
Completely agree.
If Baylor Romney was on that Oregon team, I think they have way more success. Personally, I really do think that Baylor is a tremendous quarterback talent. So his name is in the transfer portal, but his post announcing that he was leaving BYU was more of, I'm deciding if I'm going to step away from football. So that was surprising to me and interesting. But yeah, Baylor Romney will be moving on, which kind of leads us into our next section, which is, what key players are coming either from recruiting or transfer, or in BYU's case, a mission, because we get these recruits and yay, awesome, we'll see you in 2 years or 3 years, if they're a junior in high school. So as far as players coming in the quarterback position, there's a ton of smoke going around about Jackson Dart, the USC transfer.
Well, that's not confirmed, so let's keep it to who's confirmed to be coming in. So, Jason, what are some other key players that will be coming in for the 2022 season? Who else do you got?
So, one of the biggest transfers, I think, that helps with that Tyler Algier hole. Is you have the Cal transfer running back, Christopher Brooks. He will likely be the starting running back for BYU. I think he had, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but 1,000-yard rusher, multiple touchdowns. He will likely be the starting back because outside of Tyler Algier, BYU is pretty young. Well, okay. This season, outside of Tyler Algier, they had Lopini Katoa, who had announced that he is returning for his extra COVID year, which surprised me a little bit. I don't think he's necessarily a massive impact player. I hope that he can get a little better with his ball security, but Tyler Algier kind of outshined him. So maybe this is an opportunity for him to come in and
make a name for himself.
Try and make a name for himself. So Christopher Brooks and Lopini Katoa, it'll be between those at running back. And then, of course, you have the Oregon offensive lineman, Kingsley, 5-star recruit out of high school, played a couple games for Oregon and then announced that he was going to be transferring and sat out the rest of the season and is transferring to BYU. So Kingsley will be a big impact, just a massive, massive individual. He was at one of the basketball games, and I walked by and I was like, oh man, so this is what a Division I college football athlete is like, because he's a massive, massive human being. So he'll be a big time position player for that already stacked offensive line. So lastly is Chase Roberts. He's back from his mission. He's a wide receiver. He'll be competing for starting reps almost immediately. He was a big time recruit out of high school, and so it's super exciting and going to be fun to have him back. And supposedly in their bowl prep for UAB, he had been back and with the team and practicing and was looking really impressive. So it'll be fun to see those guys make a big impact, those newcomers.
And for Utah, on Utah's side, I have 3 players highlighted that actually end up filling the holes that my key players that are leaving left. One of which is Lander Barton, which was a huge get from an in-state guy, younger brother to many a famous Utah former athletes. Their younger brother, supposedly, he's probably the best of them. So who really knows? They always tend to say that about the younger siblings. Aside from him, there's also Ryan Peppins, who was recently named Mr. Football for the state of Alabama this year. He's very much, I think, going to be filling the Britton Covey role in that, he's a much smaller slot receiver, punt return specialist. Even Covey himself has name dropped the guy and pretty much expects him to fill his role. And so I think a lot of expectations are going to be on that guy, and I can't wait to see how he transitions into Utah. And finally, and the player I'm most excited to be coming into the season is, of course, Jalen Glover, which is Utah's highest recruit for this season. He was named Mr. Football for the state of Florida this year. Huge get. He's a fast guy, and one of the things that I think is the most important about keeping him, because the thing that the transfer portal has the double-edged sword that it's created, I think, is not only getting these top-graded players, but also keeping them. And I think for a player like Jalen Glover, he's not going to want to sit on the bench, which now, especially with the departure of TJ Pledger, I think that there will easily be a spot for him. Utah's offense has consisted this year of 3 primary backs, and running back number 2 just left. And even with Mika Bernard and Tavian Thomas still in, filling up 2 of those slots, there's an open slot for him, and I have no doubt that we'll be seeing plenty of them, which I think will be enough for him to, stick it out through his college career, which I'm looking forward to. I've seen this guy's highlight reels, and I am just so excited to see this guy play for Utah for 3-4 years. I'm just very excited for that.
Yeah, no, Utah has a lot of returning talent, as does BYU.
Yep. So why don't we talk about that returning talent? Who's coming back?
Yes. So for BYU, I highlighted 3 key guys. We can talk about the offense, but I'm not worried about who BYU has coming back on offense. I think BYU's issues this season did not stem from the offense, but they stemmed from the defense. And so my keys for BYU to have a successful season, it's gonna come down to the defense. And so Keenan Peely, Chaz Ayu, and Peyton Wilgar, having those 3 guys available and healthy for the good majority of the season. You never know with injuries, but But getting those three guys to be able to play significant minutes is going to have a huge impact on how BYU's year goes and how the defense plays, and ultimately how game results end, because we were really thin towards the end of the season, and so that's just it's a critical position for BYU to have those guys do well.
I think it's interesting how you focused primarily on BYU's defense, because I'm actually going to be focusing on Utah's offense, mostly because our defense is frankly just so young. There weren't very many players that could have left. I mean, Nephi Sewell was one of them, but he's leaving, so that's a moot point. But also because we're used, as Utah fans, we're used to our defense being very good and top-notch. However, having a dynamic offense that can actually score, and score fast, score a lot of points, is very new. It is not something that happens that much. And the key to that offense, I think, has actually been our insanely talented tight ends. And don't get me wrong, Utah did a great job of recruiting tight ends from the transfer portal and from high school, but the fact that...
But who needs to when you've got three guys that could start anywhere?
Exactly. But the idea of replacing them was horrifying, because all three of them looked like they were going to be going to the league, but two of our three, and frankly my two preferred out of the three, Brant Keithy and Dalton Kincaid, are both coming back for their senior year. Easily could have left, could have gone to the league easily, but both have decided that they want to come back, and that's huge for our offense, because actually Keithy was our highest receiver for the season, which a tight end usually is not, but that's just how talented Keithy was as a tight end, and so very excited to have those two players always come in clutch, and it was the key for our offense this last year, and it's so excited to be able to continue that strategy and that blueprint that we had on offense. And finally, which was kind of the big question mark, which was Tavion Thomas. He is a COVID sophomore, so technically he could have left. He's only had one season with Utah, but he was tied for number 3 in the nation for touchdowns. And so there was a big question mark of, is he going to leave? Because that's quite a note to end on. But he is coming back, so him along with Bernard and Glover, I think will, again, key to our offense is a powerful running game. And I think with those three players, specifically, Thomas the Tank Engine, is he is a key player, and it's fantastic that he's coming back for at least another year. And so, everybody, that has been the end of our little show and our post-season show. We'd like to thank you all for listening to this, and we hope that you will hear from us again here in the not-so-distant future. We intend on being a lot more consistent throughout the 2020 season, and you won't have to wait for it to start. We do plan on doing perhaps a spring ball episode, perhaps recapping any major conference news from both the Big 12 and the Pac-12. It's just one thing I want to say about this last season is it's so great to have football back in the way that football was intended. I've had a great season, and I frankly intend to have just as great of a season next year. And of course, go Utes!
And it's going to be a lot of fun to celebrate this last season of independence. We play a pretty tough schedule. It'll be sweet to go play Notre Dame in the Shamrock Classic in Las Vegas. The Mormons versus the Catholics in Sin City. It's going to be awesome. So great season to celebrate an end of independence and to be joining the table with the big dogs in the Power 5. It'll be super awesome. Look forward to covering one last season of independence with Jake, and we'll have a little bit better, I think, layout for next season as far as the week-by-week coverage. I think we're going to shoot for an episode every 2 weeks. And that'll just help with, child raising load and school and things like that.
Especially since this is very much a casual hobby for us both. We're not in this to make money or become famous.
The 5 of you that listen to us.
Exactly.
You're gonna take us places.
Exactly. We do this to have fun. We have fun. We have a blast. It's always a great time doing this. It's also a great way to just digest what's happening throughout the season that I noticed. Whenever we do these podcasts, it's just great to really look for certain things and analyze certain things and really kind of identify what's good, what's bad, and how improvements can be made. It's a great way to watch football. And thank you, everybody. Remember to like and follow us on all of our publishing platforms. And this has been Jake and Jason on the State of Sports Utah Football Podcast. And this is us signing out.
We'll catch you on the next one.
Woohoo!
Thank you for listening to this State of Sports Utah production. SFX technical support provided by Samantha Knight.